Hey guys, let me know if you can hear me. Welcome to the chat. I'm going to type in the chat box. Can you guys hear me? Let me know if you can hear me because there's been some audio issues with YouTube lately. So I want to make sure that you can hear me before I start talking and engaging with you guys. Hello, blessed in every area of my life. Welcome to the chat. Let me know if you can hear me. I'm going to type welcome to the chat at, yes, wonderful. I'm going to say welcome to the chat, blessed in every area of my life. I can't even type. I can't even type. It's not letting me type. I don't know what's going on. Awesome. Thank you, Courtney Frazier. Alyssa Peluso, thank you. Hello, MS. Welcome to the chat. Thank you so much for letting me know. Hello, Pager. Welcome to the chat. Okay, this is good because last time at some point I'm going to share with you guys my whole camera setup, and there's a lot going on down here. You guys can't see it though because I'm really good at hiding it, but there's lots of like lights up here, a camera over there, and here it is, my microphone. And so sometimes it just doesn't connect through live stream, so I'm glad it works. Glad to see all of you. Welcome today. I think we're going to try to wrap up at 8 o'clock. I really need to get out of here, so I'm going to definitely strive to wrap up at 8 p.m. Eastern time. But I think our topic today really just needs to be about vicarious trauma. I'm going to break that down for you. I have a video coming up on Sunday about that. And then I also want to kind of engage you guys in talking about Memorial Day and kind of how you plan to deal with that with toxic, unhealthy family dynamics. Are you going to go anywhere? Are you going to engage with them? Are you not? Like, what is the whole idea for you of Memorial Day weekend when it falls on a weekend? As a side note, I had a client come in earlier today and she said to me, she's like, Tamara, I'm so emotionally overwhelmed and I don't know why. And I asked her why. And she's like, it's Memorial Day holiday and I'm not quite sure that I want to spend time with my family, number one. She's like, I'm also not sure that I even want to send them a happy Memorial Day. And then the third thing she was worried about is being invited to certain family functions and having to figure out if she should say no, maybe, or yes, So I want to engage you guys in talking about that just a little bit. And then if we have some time at the end here, because the goal is to wrap up at 8, I want to walk you guys through the Beck anxiety inventory and see if you guys might be interested in kind of measuring your anxiety and kind of exploring that with me. It's what I do with clients. It's an assessment measure, and I give it to them and I say, look, here's what we're going to measure. We're going to measure how high your anxiety is, and it'll give you some ideas to kind of where your level is, what's stressing you, what's bothering you. So if we have time, I'll incorporate that as well. Let me know if that's interesting to you. Let me just recognize some of you. I'm going to mess this up, and I totally love your comments, so please don't take this personal. It is Erzabet Bukos. I hope I said that right. If not, I'm so sorry. Hello, welcome to the chat. Hello, Ronald Zion. Welcome to the chat as well. And Donald or Don One. I think we changed. Did we change our screen name? I feel like this is a different screen name. Don One, welcome to the chat. So, tell me if you guys know. Yeah, absolutely. Cherry's Jubilee is like very interesting. Yeah, okay, okay. I'll keep that in mind, Cherry's Jubilee. Thank you. Tell me if you guys have ever heard of the term vicarious trauma or secondary trauma. Have you guys heard of that before? Because a lot of lay people or individuals who are not psychologists or psychotherapists or first responders or other healthcare providers, they don't know what that word means. It's mainly geared towards healthcare providers, but the reality is that you could experience vicarious trauma yourself. You don't have to be a professional who is seeing trauma and hearing trauma stories and dealing with somebody else's trauma to then kind of feel impacted by the trauma they're sharing with you or that you see that they're experiencing. You don't have to be a professional to recognize that and to know that, okay, there's something happening to me because of all this trauma that I'm around. Take, for example, I'll give you an example. Take, for example, the whole idea of intergenerational trauma or family trauma or domestic violence or emotional trauma that has spread across generations in your family. You can listen to multiple stories. You can witness something in your family for many generations. You could be told of something that's traumatic in your family constantly or repeatedly for many generations or for a long duration of time and experience what's known as vicarious trauma, or sometimes we even call it secondary trauma. You don't have to be a healthcare provider or first responder. You could be a family member who has listened to the abuse of your father against your siblings and yourself for many years and experience vicarious trauma. I'm going to explain what that is in a minute. You can also hear domestic violence, right? Maybe dad beating up mom or mom beating up dad, or maybe verbal abuse or emotional abuse. You could be the witness of that for many years growing up and even into your adulthood, and also acquire vicarious trauma. So this term vicarious trauma, you're going to find it online, geared more towards professionals, but the reality is that it's also geared towards families, and it can impact you for many generations. Now, what is it? You guys probably already did a quick Google search. Vicarious trauma, or secondary trauma, we also call it, is this. It's, I'm feeling either intense symptoms of PTSD or complex PTSD, or I'm feeling intense emotional distress and disturbance because of the trauma that I have not only experienced, possibly, but also the trauma that I'm being exposed to, or I'm listening to it, or I'm being told about it. And it happens so much and frequently, and it happens in a way that almost sneaks up on me constantly, that I feel that I'm destabilized because of it. So let me break that down a little bit. And I'm going to get back to the chat box because I see you guys chatting as well. So I don't necessarily have to experience that particular trauma to be impacted and also feel like I'm developing trauma because of your situation. Take, for example, a friend or maybe a distant family member like a cousin or an aunt. If they are talking to you about their traumatic situation over and over and over, and this has been going on for a long period of time, you can then acquire symptoms of PTSD yourself, or your very own symptoms of PTSD can then be exacerbated or made worse, which can then create complex PTSD or further trauma symptoms for yourself. And it can destabilize you in many different areas of your life, socially, cognitively, right? You can start having memory issues. You can become inattentive and feel like you have ADD, attention deficit disorder. You can really start to become irritable, have really bad flashbacks of things that maybe happened to you. Nightmares, night terrors, all of that stuff can start happening. You can also be impacted emotionally and physically, and the list just goes on. My video on Sunday, I'm going to break this down so that you can watch that video and kind of say to yourself, is this me or is this not me? And by the end of that video, you'll get that answer. So stay tuned for my video that's coming up on Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time. But for the purposes of this live chat, I'm going to break down vicarious trauma just a little bit, and I'm going to tell you what the signs are that you may be experiencing additional trauma, right? Or you may be experiencing PTSD because of somebody else in your family that exposes you repeatedly to their own trauma. And this can happen in a variety of ways. Unfortunately, Memorial Day tends to be that day, at least in my office. I don't know if that means something's wrong with my office or what, but usually Memorial Day is that time where clients come into my office, and during that whole entire week before Memorial Day, I have clients who are suicidal. I have clients who are angry, hurting. I have clients who are experiencing heightened PTSD, meaning flashbacks. They're feeling triggered. They're feeling aroused in a way that's not good, right? Kind of hyper vigilant, and like they're like walking on pins and needles or eggshells. Sometimes they have panic attacks every day leading up to Memorial Day, because Memorial Day for my clients, not all of them, but for a pretty good amount, I'm going to say about 20 of my clients, I see at least 65 a week, depending on how that week goes for me. Some may cancel, the list goes on, but I see at least 65 clients a week. 20 of those clients struggle with Memorial Day, and usually during that week of Memorial Day. And part of the reason is that they are not only impacted by their own trauma, but they're impacted by the trauma of their family. And Memorial Day kind of reawakens, right, that awareness of trauma, of death, of loss, of grief, of dying, the whole, the list just goes on. So let me get to the chat box. I want to talk to you guys a little bit in a little bit here about what the signs of vicarious trauma is, but let me get to the chat box because I don't want to miss anything. And we're going to strive for 8 o'clock in time, so I got to stay on my P's and Q's. Hi, Peach Matodi. I hope I'm saying your name correctly. Welcome to the chat. Glad to see you tonight. Oh, thank you, Cherry's Jubilee. She says, is she close? I hope I'm close. Oh, awesome. Okay, Ezerbet Bakos says, hi, Tamara. I am simply Elizabeth. Wonderful. Welcome to the chat, Elizabeth. I'm glad that I have your name. I feel so bad when I don't pronounce your names right. Your name right, even with screen names. I just feel like it's so disrespectful. So, glad I know your name. Amy, hello. Welcome to the chat. So glad to see you as well. Scapegoat for life. Hello, welcome. Says, wow, I caught you live. Hi, Tamara in chat. Hello. Yes, I'm glad you were able to catch me live. One of the reasons why I started doing live chats on Fridays, guys, this is just a brief side note, is because a lot of you can tune in, and a lot of you can jump into the conversation and engage with me live better on Fridays than any other day. So just know from this point on, it's always going to be Fridays after 5. So he says, I had no physical violence in my home, but I saw it in the most awful ways in the neighborhood. They all ran to our home for safety. My goodness. And you know what, Cherry's Jubilee? I'm glad you brought that up because that can also turn into vicarious trauma. You're taking on somebody else's trauma, but you also have your own trauma, and so that compounds the issue. And so is PTSD likely to develop? Oh yeah, because you've got their trauma and your trauma that you're kind of holding. And the fact that there was no physical violence is fantastic. But let me just say, no physical violence doesn't always mean it's a little easier. And you know that, Cherry's Jubilee. Sometimes it's just verbal and emotional violence and abuse, and that's enough to cause PTSD and vicarious trauma. I will say that, there are people in my office building above me and on the sides of me. So I'm in a pretty busy area. And so my office building entails my office and everybody else's office. I think there's like 5 offices in this building. And let me tell you, my clients are well behaved. The children that come here, the teenagers, the adults, I love every last one of them. That's how wonderful they are. But there are times when sessions can get really heightened, and I can guarantee you the people upstairs can hear it. I can guarantee you the people across the hall can hear it. And maybe even some of the people in the parking lot in the back and the front, because sometimes there's intense family sessions where family members tend to escalate in their tone or their emotions, and something happens. Is that a form of trauma for those who are in this building with me? Most likely. If this happens all the time to them, which it doesn't, but let's say that I'm having family sessions every hour, every day, for the next 6 months, where the family sessions escalate to a really bad place, can that traumatize my neighbors? Oh, yeah, because they're hearing it all. Domestic violence, sexual abuse, racism, prejudice, discrimination, PTSD, complex PTSD, like sometimes even murder. I have families that come in, their children, a son, a daughter has been murdered, the list goes on. Can that be traumatizing for my neighbors? Absolutely. That is vicarious trauma. I'm around that traumatic thing, I can't quite escape it, and I hear it or I experience it frequently, and therefore I'm experiencing some flashbacks, or I'm hearing in my sleep what just happened today, or I am going to sleep and seeing a dream that reminds me of what happened to my mom back when, and I'm experiencing this all the time because now I have been doubly traumatized. So I just wanted to throw that out there so you guys will kind of understand how this vicarious trauma thing really works. Hello, CR Video. Welcome to the chat. Good evening to you as well. Ooh, I hit the wrong button again. But we're on point today, guys. Renee Neves, hello. Welcome to the chat. I hope I said that correctly. Glad to have you. Courtney Frazier says, I got reminder of a picture of my grandma, died in December 2020. Me, my sister, my brother, my niece, and my nephews, when my nephew, who is now 6 in January, was just a baby on Memorial Day. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm guessing, oh, Memorial Day weekend, Courtney Fraser. Yeah. And I'm guessing that was kind of like a triggered memory. Let me tell you, and for the rest of you on this chat, you may find that for Memorial Day, you start to get triggered quite a bit. I don't have PTSD, so I don't necessarily get triggered, but Memorial Day is my birthday. My mom happened to just have me during the week of Memorial Day, and so, you know, okay, my birthday is on Memorial Day, so yeah, I'm being reminded that I'm over 36. I don't like that. Uh, on a humorous note, but I'm also being reminded of my clients during the week of Memorial Day, because again, for the past 14 years of my whole career, it has been trauma for my clients during Memorial Day week, leading up to Memorial Day. And so I'm actually triggered, not as if I have PTSD or vicarious trauma, but I'm still triggered because my birthday hits, then Memorial Day hits, and so then that's a whole, if it's on a weekend, that's a whole weekend of, okay, here's some celebration with some of my family, but then my clients are suffering, and so then I'm worrying about them, or I'm wondering what they're going through, right? Or I'm getting emails from people who are suffering, or consultation requests, or something, or during that time, I'm reminded that, okay, there's some people in my family who are veterans, who are Navy SEALs, and they are struggling. They have struggled. My dad was also in the Army. So I mean, the list just goes on. I'm also reminded of deaths that has happened around this time in my family. So the week of Memorial Day, a week or the days leading up to Memorial Day can truly trigger you, even if you don't have PTSD. So Courtney Fraser, it doesn't shock me that you were kind of reminded of your nephew. It doesn't shock me at all. CR Video says, my parents kind of wanted me to experience mistakes and failures because they themselves struggled a lot and think that I should too. Sometimes I wonder how much of this trauma is mine. That's a very good point. Excellent point. I'm glad you brought that up, because sometimes in families where the family is broken, the unit is broken, the dynamic is toxic, you will find that you take on that family member's trauma, and you're right. You can't decipher if it's your trauma or their trauma. And I call that either trauma bonding or codependency, and they're two different things. I will post in the description box below after this goes off the air, that I will post the video that I did on the differences between, this was years ago, codependency and traumatic bonding. So stay tuned for that as well. I will post that for you. You can click on that video and check it out. But the differences between traumatic bonding and codependency are really, really, the line is really thin. So you really have to watch that video and pay attention. But you can experience either or, traumatic bonding or codependency. And that's how you can determine whose trauma is this, right? Am I codependent and I need to take on this person's trauma? Or am I trauma bonded to them, meaning that I've kind of fused my identity with them so much so that now I'm taking on their pain, right? Or is this, is this vicarious trauma where, I've kind of been so compassionate that now it's impacting me. And those are three different things: codependency, traumatic bonding, and vicarious trauma. Three different things. And it's like a thin line between each of them, you know? Excuse me. So that's something to kind of keep in the back of your mind. Okay, let me keep going in the chats, then I'm going to jump into the content again, and we're going to wrap up. Elizabeth says, thank you, Tamara. I don't feel that you are disrespectful, but how you treat me means a lot to me, because usually people don't care if they're disrespectful to me or not. Oh, that's so sweet, Elizabeth. Yes, yes, absolutely. You're welcome. You're welcome. One of the things that I like about live chats is we get to connect on a closer kind of a basis. It's not me just talking at the camera. It's me talking to you guys and being able to communicate. So the good part about live chats is, yes, you get a different treatment from the live chat, from me, and then from the people in the chat. And that's healing in and of itself. Thank you, Courtney Frazier. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Oh, I'm sorry. I misread that. Not Courtney Frazier. Yeah, Courtney Frazier says, yeah, it was. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Cherry's Jubilee says, happy birthday. Thank you, Cherry's Jubilee. I appreciate that. I obviously need my glasses on. Cherry's Jubilee says, you are a baby. My life started at 36. Oh, man. I don't feel like a baby. I really don't. I think it's my career. I really do. MS says, so is it vicarious trauma cops can experience as per solving crimes and seeing pictures or talking to survivors of crime, et cetera, et cetera? Yes, absolutely. It's vicarious trauma for police when they have to go to the scene of something, and maybe they're hearing a mother and a baby crying. Maybe they're hearing gunshots, right? Or maybe every day they're coming in contact with some kind of trauma or crime. They experience vicarious trauma as well. And you'll see in my video on Sunday, there's another term that I'm going to introduce to you guys, and it's compassion fatigue. So watch that video on Sunday. You'll get an explanation of what that actually means. Let me jump back in, okay, guys, to the content. Now, for vicarious trauma, let me just say there are three forms. And I think the first form of vicarious trauma, of taking on a family member's trauma or somebody else within your family, their trauma, it can be a really negative way. And this is known as a negative response to vicarious trauma. This kind of response that you could have to vicarious trauma is you start to be so compassionate and so vulnerable that you start developing vicarious trauma or secondary stress, meaning you're having nightmares, you're hearing things that probably didn't happen in your past, right? Maybe you're hearing crying, maybe you're having dreams where you're just kind of hearing someone in distress, but you don't know where they are in the dream or you can't find them. I have a client who has those kind of dreams all the time. You know, she falls into like this dream state and she hears somebody that she's emotionally connected to in the distant crying, but she can't see them and she can't figure out who it is. So she's like frantically in the dream trying to like figure out who is crying. Right? You can start to experience those kind of stressful dreams. You can also start to feel depressed and anxious and not know where that's coming from. Let's say you have PTSD. That doesn't necessarily mean you're a depressed person. It means that you're dealing with a trauma response. You're dealing with maybe some anxiety as well. It doesn't mean that you're a depressed person. But let's say you start noticing, wait a minute, I'm down, I'm feeling tearful, I'm crying a lot, I'm feeling moody, I'm feeling angry and irritable. Where's that coming from? That is a negative response to vicarious trauma. You're literally taking on somebody else's emotions and you're having a hard time holding your emotions and theirs at the same time. And so you just assume it all yourself and it becomes a burden. There's also what's called a neutral response to vicarious trauma. And that's, I've got this thing, it's a little emotional for me. And yes, I can't tell if this is my mom's trauma or my trauma, but I'm pretty sure it's my mom's trauma. But I can still use my coping skills and be okay. That's a neutral response. You're in the middle of the road, you're healthy. It's when you have a negative response that's the issue. That's when you know, wait a minute, my symptoms on top of theirs, and I'm feeling all that pressure. This is unhealthy, right? But if you are having a neutral response, then that means you're balancing it out. You're doing pretty good and you're coping with their trauma and yours. Let me give you an example of coping well with somebody else's trauma, your family, and then your own. Let's say, for example, you're a twin or you're a sibling or you're a parent, and you and your sibling, you and your twin, or you and your child experienced the same kind of trauma. How do you hold their trauma and your own? Because you guys experienced the same thing. Let's say if you're siblings, you experienced listening to domestic violence for 15 years, and you both experienced your own trauma on top of that. How do you hold their trauma and your own? It's a negative response if you start to collapse under your trauma and their own. And it's a neutral, healthy response if you can say, I've got their trauma, but I've also got mine, and I'm managing this pretty well with coping skills, medication, therapy, love, comfort, support, the list goes on. So that's an example of managing somebody else's and your own trauma. You can also give what's called a positive response to that vicarious trauma. And here's what happens with a positive response. You start to see that that other person's trauma is there, but they're surviving, they're resilient. And because of that, you start to take on their level of confidence and resilience. That's what a positive response to vicarious trauma is. I hear your trauma, I even feel your trauma, and I've got my own. But the way that I'm managing this is I see you're strong and you're doing well, and so I'm going to take that on as well, and I'm now feeling strong and powerful myself. That's kind of where you want to be, you know? Let me just check the chat box, guys, before I give you what these symptoms of vicarious trauma look like, because I'm sure you guys have experienced this. All right, guys. Sean Hammer says, hi, Tamara, and everyone in the chat. Hello. Welcome to the chat, Sean Hammer. Glad to see you tonight. We're going to wrap up in a little bit here. Yeah, Courtney Fraser said the picture that kind of triggered her came in an email today, and she said she cried seeing it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, sometimes you might have that emotional release, which is crying, and that's a very normal response, you know. And usually, if you're having a neutral response to that reminder, meaning that you can manage it, it's okay, you're feeling it, but you can manage it. That release can be healthy, that crying can be healthy, because you're kind of getting that off your chest. It's like letting another piece of that burden off of you, you know. So that might be a good way to kind of look at that. Lauren says, shared this on my platform. Thank you. Yes. Oh, thank you for that. I appreciate that. And you're welcome. Glad to see you, Lauren. Hi, Jacob Taylor. Welcome to the chat. So glad to see you as well. Says, big hugs for everybody. Thank you so much for the stream. Very nice of you to do this on your birthday. Thank you so much. My birthday is, what is this, the 25th? It's in the next 5 days. So, or 4 days. Wait, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. It is Monday. So we have some time. I have some time before I get depressed because I'm over 36. So, okay. Let me look at, yeah, let me look at Courtney Fraser really quickly, guys, and then I'm going to go back to the content. She says, can a vicarious trauma, because by always hearing about the school shootings, my middle school in 1998 had a gun brought to school. It was unloaded with a box of ammunition in the student locker. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Vicarious trauma can happen there as well, because here's what happens, Courtney. You have a situation that in, what was it, 1998, there was a basically a very threatening situation that happened in your school. And if you continue to hear about those experiences for a long period of time, which I know you have, because we've had so many massacres and so many school shootings in this country. If you continue to hear that on the news over and over and over, yeah, absolutely. You can start to develop some kind of post-traumatic response to the news. And one of my clients is dealing with this right now because she's not only a nurse who deals with emergency room situations, but, you know, she's one of those first responders. She is also working in her own private practice dealing with patients who are victims of shootings and crimes where they have tons of wounds. And so she has vicarious trauma as a result of that. So yes, Courtney, you can have vicarious trauma even to the news. You can have that PTSD response for sure. I don't know if I mentioned this. I know it's in my video on Sunday. I don't believe that I've ever experienced vicarious trauma, but I've been in some of the darkest places as a therapist, dealing with death and dying, kids in a school. For 3 years of my career, I worked in a school where there were guns brought to school that I had to kind of be a part of the investigation. I was in, school districts where kids were threatening to shoot up the school while I was in it. Like the list goes on for me. And so I think my stress has always been compassion fatigue. You'll learn about that on Sunday. And that is basically the response of I'm so compassionate and I'm so empathic that now I'm drained to death. And it took me out for a whole year. I'm going to say about 9 years ago. It took me out for a whole year. So that was the long answer, Courtney, to your question. But yes, you can experience vicarious trauma just hearing about something. I hear about a school shooting today and I'm like, oh God, not again. And I literally get my heart rate goes up. It's like, no, not again. Scapegoat for Life says, makes life more complicated for sure. Yes, it does. Vicarious trauma. It does. It does. Because if you're already dealing with trauma, then now you have this added trauma. Let's say you have complex PTSD too, right? And then you have this added trauma. That just makes it so much worse. So what are these symptoms? Well, let me highlight what these symptoms are. Symptoms of vicarious trauma. Let me just start with something known as existential anxiety and discomfort. Here's what that means. You begin to develop this existence of questioning everything. I'm questioning my life. I'm questioning my existence. I'm questioning God. I'm questioning my purpose, my meaning. And I'm really uncomfortable with why trauma has to happen to any of us. I'm getting really angry that I've had this trauma, they have this trauma, and now I'm trying to carry all this trauma and I'm trying to make my life happy, and yet all these bad things keep popping up, right? That's existential anxiety, existential discomfort. It's all rubbing you the wrong way. And now you have all these unresolved questions and these deep philosophical questions about life. I see a family for family therapy every week. It's a family of 7, and they all come in here, this room, and we have some really intense sessions for about an hour. And every week, the father who is dealing with existential anxiety and discomfort says to me almost every session, why would God put me through this? Why would God put my family through this? And that's his question every single session. It never fails. I know it's coming. I just sit here and wait for it every session, because somewhere along that hour span time that we have, I'm waiting on him to say, why did God put me in this scenario? He has absolutely no understanding of why he's experiencing what he's experiencing. And so that's existential discomfort and anxiety. You may even find yourself in this phase of existence having this symptom. You may find yourself even questioning people that you know love you. Do you really love me? Why would you love me? What about me makes me lovable, right? You may even start to be very angry and irate and irritable towards people that really have nothing but your best interests at heart. So that's existential discomfort and anxiety. I'm on pins and needles because I'm just not getting this thing called life, and I don't like it. I don't like it. Feeling numb, right? Feeling numb and kind of shut down is also another symptom of vicarious trauma. It's like being pinched, but you don't feel it, being stuck with a needle and you don't feel it. It's just like, you've gone through so much trauma and now you have this additional burden that you can barely manage. And so now you're numb and you've shut down completely. There's nothing, you're not able to feel anything. A loss of sense of meaning and purpose in life is another symptom of vicarious trauma. I've lost my will to live. That's basically what that is. I don't know if I even have anything to offer anybody, my family, my significant other, my husband, my wife, whatever. I don't have anything to offer. Do I really have something to offer? You start going through that thought process. You may also feel kind of overwhelmed by your perception of reality. So maybe your perception has become negative and skewed, and you're at a place where you start feeling that nothing is positive. And so every day you get out of bed, every day you rise, the first thing on your mind is, well, it's another day. Wonder what this day is going to bring. You know what I mean? There's no, okay, I really don't want to be up today, but I know I have to do it. People are relying on me. I got to do it. There's none of that. It's waking up thinking, I hate this place. You know? And so your perception of life may become really, really skewed. The other thing is that you may start to have problems with memory and attention. You may start to feel like you have ADD, attention deficit disorder. You have things held in your mind for about a split second and then it's gone. You can't pay attention for long periods of time, or somewhere your history has become absolutely non-existent. Like you can't remember 5 years ago. You can't remember your childhood, you know? It's like that additional burden when you're experiencing vicarious trauma just eats out a part of your memory, and you honestly and literally cannot remember no matter what. And that may be a trauma response in and of itself, right? I'll post a video that I have in the. I'll let me start that sentence over. I'll post a video in the description box that I did a couple years ago on traumatic memory loss and how trauma can just zap your mind of all of your memories. And there's different stages and different labels to that. So I'll post that after this goes off for sure for you. There's also complex PTSD. We've been talking a lot about that, but that can happen to you if you're experiencing vicarious trauma. You have your own trauma, now you have their trauma that you're trying to manage and carry and process. And so that can create, if it's for a long period of time, like growing up, or for the last 10 years, for the last 20 years, you're trying to carry their trauma and your trauma. You can start to experience complex PTSD as well. As I said in a previous live chat, complex PTSD is not a diagnosis in the DSM, that book that's really, really thick. It's just not in there as a diagnosis, but it is in a book known as the International Classification of Diseases. In short, ICD. And that's another manual like the DSM. It's used worldwide, and it is in that ICD as a diagnosis, complex PTSD, because it needs to be a diagnosis. We're slow to learn here in the United States, so we don't have that as a diagnosis, but we need it, because if you're experiencing your own trauma and somebody else's trauma on top of that, complex PTSD can become an issue for you if you don't have it already, you know? Feeling vulnerable and hypervigilant and just kind of sensitive, you know, kind of feeling like I've left my bed, I've left my house, and I just feel like I'm a target. Like everything is targeting me. Sometimes I feel like that. It's like, okay, drivers are crazy acting, they're immature, they're rude, they're disrespectful. Then I get out of my car and maybe somebody in the parking lot is speeding and don't care that I'm walking, right? Maybe I go down to Starbucks and somebody there is rude to me. Like, you may feel hypersensitive, like everything is against you. And that's how you know you're carrying too much. And maybe it's because you're carrying that other family member's trauma. And lastly, you're going to feel fatigued, tired, and just straight up exhausted. Exhausted. You may not have any of the other symptoms I mentioned, but if you have that constant exhaustion where you just feel very fatigued and overwhelmed with life, most likely you're carrying your trauma in addition to the other person's trauma, and that just isn't healthy, you know? All right, we're at 8:11. I think I'm doing pretty good. I don't mind being about 15 minutes late. Let me go back to the chat box, guys. Let me see what you guys are saying. Sidonian show or snow. I'm so sorry about that. Sidonian snow. I think it's Sidonian snow. Hello, welcome to the chat. Glad to have you. No, Jacob Taylor, you're fine. No, you do not have to apologize. I appreciate you for just recognizing my birthday. So thank you. Thank you. Jacob Taylor says the recent shootings in you've oh, I can never say this area. I'm going to say Texas affected me worse than anything since 9/11, I think. Yeah, it's UVAD. UVAD? UVAD? I feel like I'm saying that wrong. I feel like I'm saying that wrong. I don't know why. I feel like I'm saying it wrong. Says, so Jacob Taylor says, that has affected me really bad, worse than anything since 9/11, as far as stuff outside my life. Right. Yeah. Now with the news, especially from Texas, since there has been so much awful news, it triggers me every time. Yeah, absolutely. Think about hurricanes. Hurricanes. We hear hurricanes. We hear about the traumatic stories of people who have lost their home and their livelihood. And then MSNBC channel tells it, then NPR radio tells it, then Fox News tells it, then ridiculous CNN tells it. The list goes on. I say ridiculous CNN, but like they are constantly telling like these really intense emotional stories. All these news stations tell you this news, and they all give you different angles and different reports and different interviews, and it takes a toll on you. And can vicarious trauma happen there? Absolutely. Absolutely. I think most of us are traumatized when we turn on the TV nowadays, for sure. I know my mom is. My mom sits in front of the TV, like, and she's like changing channels, like, how do I find Martha Stewart? How do I find the cooking channel? Because I'm over this. And that's kind of her disposition some days. My mom is a really strong woman, but she sat in front of the TV today because she's retired. And she's like, I was leaving out for work, and I'm like, okay, mom, I'll see you later. I'll text you when I get to work. She's like, okay, love you, all of that. And she's sitting there, and she's like, before you go, how do you get Martha Stewart back on here? How do you get the Food Network? And my mom is the most real and pessimistic person you'll ever find on this earth. I really do believe that. And that's probably why I'm pessimistic, but that's a whole other story. But my mom today, she was just like, I can't do it. I can't. Like, I'm tired of this. And so yeah, I think my mom's traumatized by the news. I think most of us are. It is what it is. All jokes aside, it's traumatizing. Let me keep going. Sean Hammer says, I'm feeling quite good right now because I just single-handedly trashed a narc's attempt to ruin my business. This was someone I thought I knew, so they got in under the radar. Wow, so good for you. Maybe that's some strength there you exercise. That's really good. Good for you. Good for you. All right, let me keep going, guys. Hello, Joy. Welcome to the chat. Glad to see you. I don't remember seeing you, so welcome to the chat. Paul Boston, hello. Welcome to the chat. So glad to see you. Yes, I'm glad you caught it live as well. Hello. Yuval D. I know you're trying to help me say it. Uvaldi. Uvaldi? I think it's Uvaldi. So let me tell you something about me. So I can do just about anything I put my mind to, but sometimes my eyes don't translate the pronunciation of the words that I'm looking at. Does that make sense? So, like, I've always been that kind of an intellect where, hey, I get everything. But then when it comes to something as simple as a term, I'm like, how do you say this? Or if you throw LOL at me, sometimes I'm like, what? So I don't know what you call that. I really don't. But thank you, 939449. Thank you. I appreciate you. Yeah, you're right, Courtney Fraser. You do see the traumatic situations on YouTube as well. Yep. Yep. Go to YouTube and you see the news. It's like, how do I get out of this box of trauma? Right? How do I get out of this? Joy says, hello. Thank you. Glad to be here on your live. Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for being on my live. Yes. Thank you. Yes. She says you got it. Yes. Cheers, Jubilee. Yes, you're welcome, scapegoat. At scapegoat for life. Keiko D, hello, welcome to the chat. Glad to see you. Says it's generic rebel, but it's made that way to pent another against another. The economic machine runs best on hate and war. Thank you for being a pillar of light in a world of abuse and sadness. Thumbs up. Thank you so much. That's such a humbling comment. Thank you for that sweet comment. I agree. I agree. The machine does run best on hate and war. So I think sometimes, in order for the news media to have a job, they have to like run the negative stuff on like this wheel all the time. And if you've noticed, sometimes the news repeats. Like sometimes I'm sitting in front of my computer and I'm like, didn't I just hear this 5 seconds ago? Because it repeats, especially on NPR radio. My God, I love those people, but um all right, guys, we're a little over time, 17 minutes. I'm gonna call it a night. I love talking to you guys. I'll see you next Friday. Stay tuned for Sunday's video. I will be in the live chat box. I'm probably gonna be in and out though. But I will be there. I just like talking to you guys and really getting your ideas and your thoughts, and I like getting all of you in a place where you can support each other. That's one of the reasons why I continue my channel. So thank you so much for all your support and love and support of each other. I love seeing that. There's a little bit of delay on my end, so I'm probably going to hit the end live stream and you're probably going to be commenting. Ignore me. I'm going to comment back. Okay, I'm not ending the chat beforehand. I don't want you to feel like I'm just cutting everybody off. So, all right, guys, I will see you on Sunday and then I'll see you again live next Friday. Try to have a peaceful, relaxing Memorial Day full of meaning and purpose and recuperation. I'll see you soon. Bye bye.